let's just jump back into this. Crew, we are back. We are talking more Alien Isolation. This is the spoiler part, okay? Mm-hmm. We made the decision at the end of last episode to split this into two. All right, so if you're hearing this one and you haven't heard our previous episode, I think we're calling Alien Isolation Origins. That is where you're going to get like the full scoop on Amanda Ripley, some Ellen Ripley stuff you didn't go, all of the events that the book, this is about the novelization, all the events that the book seeds into the narrative that develop the character of Amanda Ripley, give you her history and everything. We separated all of that into a separate chunk in case you've already played the game and you know the events that happen on Sevastopol, but you want that extra information, or you're planning on playing the game or watching the web series or whatever, and you don't want the events of the game spoiled for you, you can go listen to that previous episode and get just a ton of background stuff that's going to like really help you get to know the Amanda Ripley character, give you some more information about Ellen Ripley and everything. But from here on out, this is not just spoilers for the novel, but spoilers for the web series and the video game. Like anything Alien Isolation titled, like this is where you're going to get the core story of what goes on.
Yep. For
so
sure.
This is your spoiler warning. All right. Don't get mad at me if you listen to this and it ruins the story. And I want to get the spoiler alert up front because our designations might also be spoilers.
They sure are.
But this is, of course, Crew Expendable. And I am, of course, Abandoned Stuffed Tiger Hallstrom.
And I am Deputy Marshal Rohrbacher.
And we are just a couple of drones nesting in the engineering bay of the Alien universe.
Nice.
Yeah. Came
Very
up with that
nice.
one on the fucking fly.
Magnifique.
I had an alternate one, which was we are just a couple of hidden queens beneath the engineering bay of the Alien franchise. Do you know why it was almost that?
Because that doesn't actually happen.
It might happen. That's the thing, dude. I was reading this.
Well,
okay. We're hitting
sure.
spoilers right away. Okay. There is.
Well, yeah.
So there's a scene in this. We can go a little bit out of order, right? There's a scene in this where there is an alien nest on Sevastopol Station. There are a number of ovomorphs. There are more than one drones, but as far as we know the story, there's just the one, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So the developers of the game specifically left all of that vague. They wanted to leave the possibility that there could be a queen on board or the possibility that there could be an egg morphing scenario going on. We talked about egg morphing a little bit in our Alien, the original screenplay episode, right? And I love that they made that decision to like not show a queen because they really wanted the story of Isolation to feel like the original movie, right?
You know, it's funny you say that because I had read something that said that you never actually see a queen on screen during the climax of the game.
Right.
Because they didn't want you, the player, to think that there was a chance you might have a boss fight with it.
That is absolutely true. That's why they didn't show that. They kept it vague on purpose either way. And they wanted to kind of imply that either situation could be the case. But allegedly because we know the life cycle, because we haven't really seen egg morphing in anything canon, but we have seen queens, obviously. Your mind would go to that. So the idea is that, you know, the drone that you're facing off most of the time in the game or in the events, A, may not even be the same drone every time, but B, probably isn't the drone that hatched out of foster. That it might have been a queen that hatched out of foster.
That would make sense.
And that in that scene, when you're in the engineering bay and you're in the nest, apparently in the game, you can kind of hear like a roar that evokes the sounds that the queen was making in Aliens. And that might be a hint that even though Amanda never runs into the queen, there is a queen on board.
Got it.
Kind of makes sense. I think it makes
sense.
Yeah.
That works for me.
Just right away with the fucking spoilers, but that was just some information I wanted to make sure I got in there because, of course, that isn't technically covered in any of this stuff.
Yeah.
So
yeah, for sure.
But let's jump into this, man. When we last left off, Amanda was being approached by Samuels, a company representative, telling her that the flight recorder for the Nostromo had been recovered and was being taken to Sevastopol Station.
Well, it's funny that you say that because there's actually two scenes in the book that take place before that that are not part of the flashbacks.
Right. So one of those is, of course, the story of the USCSS Anesidora.
Which, let me ask you something here, Neal.
Uh-huh.
Have you ever seen the movie Alien?
I have seen the movie Alien, yes.
That's literally what happens here. This is the same story, the same events in pretty much the same way. The story, like what happened with the Anesidora, pretty much is what happened with the Nostromo.
Have I seen that movie? Pretty sure I've seen Alien.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, man. But what happens in this makes sense. Like, that's the thing. Like, it is a repeat of events, but man, it makes sense because the USCSS Anesidora, from now on, I will just say the Anesidora. I won't say the whole thing. Is a deep space. It's an independently run deep space salvage vessel, like so many other ships we will encounter in various alien stories, captained by Henry Marlowe.
Yeah, Marlowe. Yep.
And just by coincidence, the Anesidora picks up the Nostromo's flight recorder. It's zipping around Zeta Reticuli system, right?
Yep.
Collect and salvage, and they just fucking happen to collect what I think they refer to as Pandora's box, right?
Yep, that is correct. The Nostromo's flight recorder is like, legendary item among scavengers. It's like the one thing that will bring in like a kingly sum if you were to find it. And then they actually do just happen to scoop it up during a salvage run by accident.
Just by fucking accident. They scoop it up and they have it. And it's encoded. They can't decode it, right?
I should also interject just real quick. This is the prologue for the book, and this is like literally when you start reading the book, this is the opening section of the book.
It is.
This is how it starts off, as the story of the Anesidora.
Right.
This takes place 1 month before the primary events of the novel, and people that have played the game will recognize this story because what happened on the Anesidora was not invented for the book.
No.
What the part of it that was invented was us actually seeing it happen.
Right.
In the game, it's alluded to and talked about after the fact. The thing they added to this book was us seeing it happen in real time beforehand.
Right. Yeah. These events do happen in the game. I believe when Amanda confronts Henry Marlowe in the game, she does get the story of the Anesidora.
Yeah, I don't think we actually see it, but we are told these events.
Right. I honestly don't remember.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I didn't get that far in the game because the game is too scary, so I stopped playing it.
It was a very scary, very, very scary game. And I played it 8 years ago and haven't played it since then. So my memory is hazy.
Yeah.
We will be conquering the game, both of us. We will be conquering the game for this podcast in the future.
That is correct.
So
yes.
we'll circle back to this.
But yeah, like you were saying, they found the Nostromo's flight recorder, and its data is encrypted, and so one of the guys starts trying to work his magic to get into it, and while they're doing that, they intercept the same distress signal coming from LV-426 that the Nostromo had intercepted approximately 15 years earlier.
Yeah, so their theory is there's just so much money to be made on anything Nostromo. If the Nostromo sat down on that planet, it could still be there, right? Something could be there, maybe a lifeboat, maybe the ship itself, who knows? That could be where the distress beacon is coming from. We got to follow it. This is good setup. Like, this is very good setup. Like, I like the idea that a hunt for the Nostromo has led to other ships finding the beacon. Mm-hmm. It's smart, right? It makes sense. So yeah, so the ship lands. They land. Henry Marlowe, does he go out on the expedition? I think he does, along with his wife and I guess second in command, Catherine Foster.
Yep.
And then the other crew members, there's an Alan Meeks and there's a Crispin Haste, and then Dean Lewis is the engineering technician. I believe he's the one working on the flight recorder.
And he is, and that's all 5 of them. Marlowe explicitly states at one point, he's like, I'm bringing in so little salvage that I'm seriously considering cutting a 5-man crew down to a 2-man crew.
Yeah.
So that is all 5 of the people on the ship.
Yeah, that is it. Long story short, alien happens, right?
Yep, that is correct.
Facehugger attaches itself to Foster.
And that is something I would like to mention real quick. I've always wondered like how, Foster gets this face hugger on her helmet because, like I said, I listened to the audiobook some months prior, and I'd always wondered how that face hugger got attached to her face when she still had a helmet on. And in this novel, it says that they hear a shattering of glass, and it turns out to be the face hugger breaking through the visor to attach itself to her face.
Tongue punching through the visor. Gross.
Correct.
Fucking can't believe I said that.
But here's the thing. I looked it up, and in other sources, it's depicted as they exude some weak acid that melts the glass.
Interesting.
And then they just jump in.
Man, it's always seemed like a shatter situation to me.
It's funny you say that because when I noticed that in this novel, it says that it shattered the glass, my brain went, wait a minute, I thought it melted the glass with acid. And so it's funny that you're like, I always thought it was a shatter situation because I always thought it was a melting situation.
Interesting. Yeah. No, because I know like the face hugger can keep its host alive. It can like breathe for it and things like that, like keep its body functions going. So I just assumed it punched through the glass and kept the host alive.
Well, regardless of how it had happened in previous iterations, this right now, when the Anesidora ends up on 426, it gets onto her face by breaking through the glass.
Sure.
And then they freak out and bring her body back to the ship, and then they break quarantine procedure. It literally says in my notes, they even break quarantine procedure to bring her back on board. Line break. This is literally Alien.
It is, but it makes sense, and it leads credence to my theory that the Alien original screenplay comic could be a separate incident with a separate alien creature in the same universe. That's like a cousin of the Xenomorph.
There was also one or two other little minor things from earlier on in this scene that I liked. Like, for instance, during conversation after they find the flight recorder, somebody mentions that the Nostromo, its model of ship, was a modified CM-88 Bison, which I thought was a nice little piece of verisimilitude.
Oh yeah. That's right. It was converted to be a towing vessel. It was like a cruising. The Nostromo was like a cruising ship that was converted to be a towing vessel. That's an important detail too. We'll touch on that in a second.
While they're inside the Juggernaut, two different things happen that I thought was genuinely a nice touch.
Yeah.
First off, one of them finds the winch from the Nostromo that Kane used to go underneath it, and they use that same winch to go down there themselves.
Yep.
And also, touching on something you mentioned earlier, and something that I thought was a nice way to tie up a possible plot hole, one of the characters explicitly shuts off the distress beacon that they picked up that led them here.
Right. They like followed the catwalk. They like found the distress beacon and they shut it off. And didn't that also shut off the blue haze over the eggs?
I think it did, not because I specifically remember them saying that, but because I don't remember there being any blue haze when they went down below the ship.
I'm pretty sure that shuts off as well, because I remember thinking like, hey, this might be why, like, if that blue haze was in fact some kind of like, field to keep the eggs in stasis, and Kane just got too close and broke the haze and everything, like, or an alert system about them getting out. With that shut off, that would explain why they spread so rapidly. On Hadley's Hope.
That's fair. Yep.
Yeah, but also very important that is how the distress beacon gets shut off, because then because the planet gets settled, right? The planetoid gets settled, and they would absolutely have been hearing that distress beacon when they were like shipping the colonists over, if it hadn't been turned off. So that is a pretty important detail.
I thought that was a very neat way to tie up a little plot hole, because it's like, I'm reading this story and going, oh, that line is in there to cover up that plot hole.
Right.
But like, in the canon, like in the context of the story, of course they would turn it off. They think they're about to find the Nostromo.
Right.
They don't want any scavengers showing up to scoop anything they find.
Totally.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah, man, that is pretty cool. That is a really, really important thing that happens in this that does.
Yeah, it's just casually thrown out in like an offhanded line, but like after I read it, I was like, that's actually really important. Like narratively, that actually matters a lot that they did that.
Keith DeCandido really paying attention when writing this
That's
book.
right.
Again, I really liked this book.
Yeah, I thought it was good too.
Yeah, if you're a scaredy cat and you can't play the game like a lot of people are, first of all, no judgment. I'm right there with you.
Same.
Check out the novelization. It's worth it.
Yeah, like how I mentioned that I listened to the audiobook a few months ago.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it was because we decided to start doing this show, and then I was like, man, I'm gonna have to play Isolation eventually, but that is like way too scary of a game. I don't think I can do it. So I'm going to read the novelization instead because I know I'll be able to get through that.
Right.
That's basically how the prologue ends, though. It's like Foster gets attacked, she gets the face hugger on him, and they're like, we need to give her back to the ship, fuck the quarantine procedures. And then there is a hard cut to part 1 of the novel, and that's when we find out that was the prologue.
Sure. I want to finish up the story of the Anesidora.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
So they don't just break protocol by bringing Foster back on board. They break protocol by then taking her to Sevastopol Station to get medical treatment, right? Mm-hmm. Face hugger on her face and everything. Like, I think she was delivered in stasis. And
she was, yes.
Yeah, that is the inciting incident. That is a problem. That is a problem that is going to affect everybody on Sevastopol Station.
It sure will. Sure. I mean, the spoiler alert, the entire station gets destroyed by the end of the story, and it is directly because of this event right here, where they bring Foster to Sevastopol, is the reason why it ends up like that.
Should we talk a little bit about what Sevastopol Station is?
Sure.
Yeah.
It's not, well, I was going to say it's not a Weyland-Yutani station, but it is now, but like it was built and made by one of WY's primary rivals, Seegson. Is it
Seegson? Yeah.
Is it Corporation or Electronics? I don't remember what their full name is, but it's Seegson. And it is stationed in orbit around a big gas giant in the Zeta 2 Reticuli system. And I believe it's there to like harvest gases and minerals or something like that. I don't remember exactly what its stated purpose is, but that's where it is.
It's also it's a space station. It's for people traveling through this particular flight path, right? Mm-hmm. So commercial ships, I guess recreational ships, if there are any in this universe, like people just stop there. You know, it's kind of like it's sort of a way station, right?
It's kind of like Gateway Station, yeah.
It's like Gateway Station, just further away, and ran by Seegson, formerly Sieg and Son, a European conglomerate founded by Josiah Sieg. And Seegson is primarily a synthetic manufacturer, but they also manufactured like General Electronics. Like, wasn't Amanda Ripley's like iPad or tablet or whatever they call it in this? I think they just call them pads in this.
It was a notepad, NOHT.
Right. It was a Seegson product, and she hated it until she got
it was, yes.
But then she got a better one from that data dealer who
from that if you listen to the previous episode, Martin Okeke, that is where she got the nice fancy I don't remember who made it, but like she upgraded from her Seegson notepad thanks to Martin Okeke giving her one.
It's probably like a Samsung, right? Like an
equivalent, yeah.
Galaxy Tab S9 or whatever. You know, I don't know, man. So do you think like Apple just doesn't exist in this universe?
I mean, I assume there's some like, you know, in-universe equivalent, you know.
Right. But like OnePlus is still around.
Yeah. I mean, like, hell, for all I know, maybe the equivalent is Seegson, you know, who knows?
TCL is still like in business, but Apple's not. Apple's not making the iPad anymore. They got pushed out of the market by the Seegson Notepad, NOHT.
Correct. And also the P in pad, because it's one word, but the P is camel case, like capitalized.
Of course it
so
is.
it's one word, but it's capital NOHT, capital PAD, but it's all one word.
That's reverse of iPhone.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever. Yeah, so that's Seegson. And because the shipping routes or whatever have changed, Seegson is being shut down and decommissioned, and it's going to be sold for scrap, basically.
Sevastopol is.
Sorry,
Seegson's
Sevastopol.
the one shutting it down, but yes.
Sure, it doesn't seem like Seegson's doing too well as a company at this point.
It's implied they're not like throughout the entire book, like, during chapter breaks and in between sections of the book, they have like this 1-page little thing where it'll be like a memo from one person sent to another person, and like almost none of them are like
good
relevant to the narrative of the story.
Right.
There are one or two later on in the book that I actually point out, but like most of them aren't. And like in one of them, they basically say that it's like, Seegson shutting down Sevastopol. Like you said, I think it was because like, shipping routes have changed or whatever. And so they started like the sundowning process for the station, and they're breaking it down, they're decommissioning it, they're sending not pieces of it, but they're sending like equipment in it to other places. Most of the crew is getting fired, and so like when Samuels and Taylor and Amanda are on their way to Sevastopol, this is like, we find out near the end of the story that like Sevastopol is due to be decommissioned like within a month of when this story happen. It will be fully shut down and no longer occupied or in use at all within just a few weeks. And so it's already like mostly shut down. Most of the stuff is gone by the time this story happens.
It is, yeah. There's still, if you played the game, there's still shit everywhere though. But businesses have closed down. Like there was like a Galleria, like a mall and everything in it. And those places are all like shuttered, and I mean, and not just because of the chaos that's happening on the place. Like the place was in the process
they were already shut down before all that started happening.
Right. So, interestingly, Seegson is a synthetics manufacturer, but
they sure are.
They don't seem like a very good one.
Well, it specifically states, like in one of those memos, there's like an internal Seegson memo from like the head of synthetics to the CEO that's like, look, man, you can complain all you want about how we need to start making synths as good as Weyland-Yutani makes it. But like, I'm telling you, it's not possible to make them as good as they do. We just don't have the tech. We don't have the money. We're just not as good at it as they are.
We got to get our hands on one of those Davids, right? We got to reverse engineer one of those Davids if we want to do that. Anyway, so that's Sevastopol. And that is where the Anesidora has docked with the black box, the flight recorder for the Nostromo, and Foster with a face hugger on her face. And of course, Amanda Ripley doesn't seem to know that, and neither does, what's his name, Samuels. He doesn't allude to
Samuels,
that. If he knows, he doesn't allude to it, but I'm pretty sure he doesn't know, right?
It's based on stuff that, based on reaction he gives during conversations later on in the book. I'm pretty sure he doesn't know.
Right. I'm just remembering. Should we just spoil Samuel's whole deal right now?
He's a synth.
Samuels is a synth. Yeah, we're just going to say that now.
Yeah. It doesn't really end up becoming relevant until it does at the very end of the story. But up until then, he's just a guy, and it doesn't matter really at all that he's a synth.
No, it doesn't. But he is a synth. Where is I'm looking for I put it in the wrong Google Drive, so I'm going to have to get like the right one. I'm looking for our synthetic list.
Did you add the ones from Alien Icarus that we did in the previous one?
I have not, no, but...
Okay. So, yeah, like I was saying, the prologue happens, the story of the Anesidora, and that prologue ends with them deciding to break quarantine procedure to bring Foster back on board the Anesidora. It smash cuts there, but as you mentioned a couple of minutes ago, we later on find out what happened after that, but the prologue that we're reading ends at that point.
Right.
And then it cuts to part 1. The story starts proper. And how we already mentioned that, the opening of the game is Amanda working on something and Samuel's coming up and offering her a trip on a ship going to Sevastopol Station.
Yes.
That ship, by the way, is called the Torrens.
The USCSS Torrens, an M-class commercial transport starship.
And that is the opening scene of the game, but
right.
In the novel, there is a brief little bit of stuff that I thought was interesting enough that I figured I should mention.
Okay.
It actually starts off, this starts off with Amanda at the Colonial Marine Barracks asking a general where Private Zula Hendricks is.
Sure.
And he's like, I don't fucking know. Get out of here. Buzz off, And so the two of them almost get into an argument, and then she pisses him off on purpose and then runs away. And
sure, because what's the easiest way to piss off a Marine?
Call him a soldier.
And what's the best way to get your ass beat?
Call a Marine a soldier.
Yeah, piss off a Marine. Yeah.
But yeah, she was actually going there to meet Zula for lunch.
Yeah, man.
But when she gets there, finds out the entire barracks have been emptied because they've been sent out on a mission, and turns out Zula went with him, which means her convalescence and her physical therapy and stuff has been going well enough that she can start going on missions again.
Sure.
So Amanda's I guess she's not going to be shadowing me anymore. So,
right.
She goes how you asked in the previous episode, how at the very end of it, how you were and then she's just working on something when Samuel shows up. Well, in this scene, we find out what it was she was working on. She's working on a Lagdaman X-34 land buggy.
Of course. Right. Yeah.
Because again, she doesn't have engineer certification, so she just has to do the little bullshit jobs around on Luna.
At least she wasn't working on that Audi lunar rover from
That's
Covenant.
Right.
She could have been working on one of those.
The Quattro.
Yeah, the Audi Quattro. Yeah.
And so yeah, like I said, the opening scene of the game just shows her working on something, and Samuels comes up and interrupts her. This we find out we have about 10-20 minutes of a tale before that, where we find out what she was doing when she goes and starts working on this thing when Samuel shows up.
Right.
And then it basically cuts to them getting on the ship and going into cryo sleep.
Yeah.
And because I said I would do it in the previous episode, this is the moment during cryo sleep where there's that flashback sequence where it's the little snatches broken up over multiple paragraphs of just a montage of stuff. She the context
dreams.
of it is she's having these montage dreams while she's in cryo sleep.
Cryo dreams of her family breaking up and her mom being sad all the time and having to go away.
And then
that sucks, dude.
And then at this point, this is when she wakes up from cryo sleep. And for anyone out there that's played the game, you would know that moment is the moment where you actually start playing the game, and the opening cutscene has ended.
Right. So we are now on board the USCSS Torrens. This is a ship.
That is correct.
So we talked about this earlier, how the Nostromo was an M-class transport ship converted into a towing vessel.
Mm-hmm.
This is if the Nostromo had never been converted into a towing vessel. It is the same class, the same model, essentially, as the USCSS Nostromo. They even point that out in the dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, the motivation of the game was to give you a chance to walk around the Nostromo, right?
Correct.
It's interestingly coincidental in the storyline that it would be the same exact model of ship that Ellen Ripley disappeared on. That's one of those things where I'm like, okay, there's a handful of things in this that just do feel a little video gamey to me, if that makes sense. right?
And that's one of them.
This is one of them. It just feels like that was in there so that we, as the player, could explore the Nostromo and see the gravity suits or whatever they're called.
Yeah.
And see the drinking birds all over the tables and everything, and like the hallways and the sleep pods and the space underwear and all of that kind of stuff. Like, that's what it was there for. I don't know that it adds anything to the story. You know what I mean? Like, there isn't even like a lot of, it's just like, this is a similar model to what your mom disappeared on. And she's like, yeah, I know, I've worked on these before. So it's not even like a thing that like has any meaning to Amanda.
Yeah.
You know,
it doesn't even become relevant. They just put it in there because the players would want to walk around on the Nostromo.
Right. Which is cool. Very fun to do in the video game, but in the outside of the context of that, reading this just as a novel, I was a little bit like, all right, this is just like putting a hat on a hat a little bit. Right.
Yeah.
But whatever, like, it's totally fine. And it is cool. Like, I think that's an interesting detail that, because it didn't make sense to me. I was like, well, why are they sending this towing vessel? Well, it's not. It's a transport ship, right? The Nostromo was a converted transport ship. That makes sense to me. Okay. But who's the crew on this? We've got Captain Diane Verlaine. The Torrens is her ship. She owns it, right?
That is correct.
We've also got Amanda Ripley, obviously. Well, we've got a navigator and a communications officer on the ship named William Connor.
Yep.
Then we've got Samuels, the synthetic, who has not revealed himself to be a synthetic yet.
Yep.
And we've got, it's Nina
Taylor.
Nina Taylor is like a lawyer, like a legal representative for Weyland-Yutani, right?
She's, like earlier when Samuel said that it's like, me and someone else are going there to pick it up and you can come with you if you like. Taylor is the other person that wasn't Samuel's that was going to be going. Yeah.
Yeah. So they're just, everyone's awake from cryosleep because they're almost at Sevastopol, and they're like hailing Sevastopol to like let them know they're coming to dock, right? They're not getting any calls back. They're not getting any signal, like radio messages back, whatever. You know what I'm saying.
And also, I should specify right before all this happens, Amanda ends up meeting Taylor in the mess hall, and the two of them get to talking. And during the conversation is when we have the first major flashback about when we find out about Daniel and Daniel the tiger, and like it ends with us being told that the Nostromo went missing, and Paul's like, I don't fucking care.
Sure.
That flashback, like, that happens. We're told that while Taylor and Amanda are just in conversation with each other. Right. And then after that flashback happens, it's basically like Verlaine gets on the comms and is like, we're approaching Sevastopol, everyone come up to the bridge. And then they get to the bridge, and that's when the Verlaine starts hailing the Sevastopol, and she's not getting any messages back where I cut you off from.
So they keep approaching the station, and they start to notice, I think Amanda notices first, that looks like there's some damage, right? And maybe they know the station's being decommissioned. They might think that some of it is from that, but they notice that they can't dry dock, right? They can't dock the ship.
They sure can't.
So they attempt like a tethered spacewalk to get Amanda, Samuels, and Taylor onto the station.
And as you may imagine, it goes perfectly without any flaws whatsoever, 100%. And everything great happens.
Absolutely flawless. They walk in, they get the thing, all the data's there, they walk the tightrope back and book over.
Correct.
No, it goes very badly. Some debris or something like comes loose and like hits the line and knocks Amanda. Like she like flies towards the station. She's able to get inside the airlock like just by luck, basically.
Well, I should say, it's not just some debris that comes off. It's actually an explosion that knocks some debris off, and then that debris cuts the line they're using to travel to the station. Yeah. And the reason why I want to make that distinction is because that explosion is explained in some story DLC in the video game.
Oh, can you explain it now? I don't think I know this.
there is a piece of DLC. It might be like, I don't know, like a survival map or something like that. I'm not sure. But it canonically takes place right before the events of the game.
Oh, fun.
And I think you're playing as like Marshall Waits.
Sure.
Or maybe like Deputy Marshal Ricardo, or I don't remember who your character is that you're playing as.
Okay.
But it's basically like the scenario is you have to run around the station and gather parts to create this bomb that you're going to use to like set off and kill the alien. And the climax of that mission is that you set off the bomb, but it goes off wrong and blows part of the Sevastopol out. And that explosion that you cause at the end of that mission is canonically the explosion that happens now that cuts their crossing line.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah. So
Amanda gets on the station, but she's been separated from Samuels and Taylor, and she doesn't know what's going on. I don't think she can't communicate with the Torrens, but she knows that the Torrens is going to stay kind of orbiting the station for 24 hours, right?
Yeah, Verlaine had said she was going to hang out outside the station for a full 24 hours. So Amanda knows that the Torrens is going to be out there, but she can't like hail them on the comms, and she doesn't know why. And eventually she does figure out why. It's like on purpose. But at this point, she doesn't know why the radios aren't working.
Right. Hey, we have another Joseph Conrad connection, just like the Nostromo, named after the Nostromo from the novel, the Joseph Conrad novel, the Nostromo. And the Sulaco also is a Joseph Conrad ship that's, I believe, in the same book in Nostromo.
All right.
The Torrens is named after a real-life clipper ship that Conrad served on before becoming an author.
That's fun. I didn't know that.
I like that. There's a nice little tradition they're doing. Like
That's cool.
I like that they
I'm
did
enjoying that. Yeah, that's nice.
So now Amanda's on Sevastopol Station, and shit's just gonna go wacky, right? I think we can kind of brush through a lot of these small things, but I will say this was the section of the novel that I was like, oh boy, am I in for a slog? Because we get a lot of her like finding the maintenance jack, right? The wrench that you use in the game. And then we get her like, just gonna tag a couple of these scenes. Like there's some scenes where she's like, she finds plans to make, I think
smoke bomb.
Smoke bomb, and gathers the materials to make the smoke bomb, and she picks up food rations and water, and I'm like, so much of the fucking game was that.
Yeah, like so much of the pure gameplay part of the game didn't really need to be in the book, I'll admit.
Right. Like the way the game plays is like you get a tool, you get your hacking tool, you get your maintenance jack, you get your stuff to make smoke bombs, and then you use these items to access deeper parts of the station, right?
Yeah.
Things you couldn't access before. It's kind of Metroidvania style, right?
Yep.
I am glad that the book wasn't that, but the book kind of started out as that, and I guess it's because there just wasn't a lot to say about the early part of what Amanda was doing. Like, so I think we should just fast forward up to the part where she meets, is it Axel? Is that his name?
Well, to be fair, there isn't a huge section of the book.
Right.
Like there isn't a whole lot of actual word space between when she arrives and when she meets the guy.
Yeah.
But yes, his name is Axel. That is correct.
Some of this, I mean, just generally some of the stuff, like where nothing is happening, we can just kind of jump over.
Like the only thing of note is that just like in the game, she finds the maintenance jack by coming across some guy's bloody corpse and then pulling it off of him.
Right.
That's like, because she does that because she needs to open this cargo door, and then she gets the maintenance jack and she's about to open the door, and then somebody puts a fucking gun up against the back of her skull.
Yeah, and it's this guy Axel who's losing his mind and wasn't supposed to be here anyway. He was supposed to be off the ship like 2 weeks ago or something, and he would have been fine, but now he's stuck in all this nonsense, and he's holed up in the vents with bottles of water, and clearly pissed off another group of survivors, and won't tell Amanda what's going on, just keeps telling her that there's a killer on board.
Which doesn't fucking mean anything because he's pointing a gun at her.
Right.
For all she knows, he's the killer.
She's suspicious of him. Some shit happens, and then dude gets killed by the alien. Let's just jump into
Yeah,
that
like
stuff.
they have a couple of run-in with some other survivors, and all of those run-ins are hostile on some level or another. They have to sneak by a group of them. Axel kills some guy, and Amanda fucking freaks out. And then 104 pages into the 292-page book, Axel takes a xenomorph tail through the chest, and the big man has finally arrived.
Fucking
and also,
drone.
I should say that's not just me being like facetious or like, blowing a fanfare or whatever. In my notes, the primary xenomorph that chases her throughout this entire book, I literally refer to him as the big man in my notes.
He's
because
the big man.
Most drones are like what, 8 feet tall, right around there, something like that, 7 feet tall. This one is explicitly described as being like almost twice Amanda's height, so it's more like 10 or 11 feet tall.
I don't know. What if she's like 3.5 feet tall?
Well, she could be, but
she's small
small
enough to climb in those vents for Blasco or whatever the guy's name was.
Brodsky. And
Blasco's a guy I went to high school with.
Correct. But I believe on Xenopedia, I believe this specific drone, his height is listed as around 10 feet tall.
Holy
so
moly.
he is like bigger than most drones usually are, which is why I refer to him in my notes as the big man.
Yeah, this is a big boy right here.
But yeah, like I said, 104 pages in, Axel takes a fucking xenomorph tail through the chest, and then the xenomorph just pulls his body into a vent, and that's it. And then I will say, for the people that have played the game, immediately after that moment, there is like an optional hidden xenomorph encounter in the game that this book does not do, and I was a little bit disappointed that they didn't do it.
Yeah, what? I don't think I know this, because I think when that happened in the game when I played, I just fucking hightailed it back to like the transport car or whatever.
Well, it's like you walk through this little tunnel into this big, vaguely circular room, and it has like the tunnel leading out on the right side. And when you walk in through the middle of the room is the cutscene where the xenomorph kills him. And then you have to go down that passageway to the right, and that's where like the transit car is. But like, in the book, she runs up to the transit car, hits the button, and then the doors open and she gets on the transit car and it zips away.
Which is what is what Neal does when he plays Alien Isolation. Then he turns the game off and watches Saved by the Bell.
Well, when the thing of it is, though, is in the game, when you walk up to that transit car, it's not there. So you have to hit the button and then wait for it to show up.
Yeah, you fucking do.
My point is, though, what I'm getting at, though, is the way it works is you have to hit the button and wait for the transit car to come up, and then the transit car doors open and you can run in and hit the button. But like, there is an optional hidden encounter there where once the transit car shows up, if you don't immediately get on it, the xenomorph shows up and attacks you.
Yeah, of course it does, which is why you immediately get on it when you play Alien Isolation. Again, you do that, you save the game, you turn it off, and you watch Saved by the Bell. That's how you play Alien Isolation.
That's my point. Like, I wished they had included that encounter in the book, because like, she sees the tail, and then it's another like 70 pages or something like that until she finally actually sees the xenomorph again. And so I would have liked to see, like, I would have actually liked to have it there, quote unquote, on screen
as like the
when
big
it
reveal.
First showed. Yeah, exactly. Like, I just would have preferred to see that, but like, I don't have a problem with the way it did. I just thought adding that little hidden optional encounter would have been a fun little touch.
Yeah, I can see that. Sorry if I interrupted too much on that.
No, you're fine.
But after this,
Axel gets killed by the xenomorph. And then she has a couple other hostile encounters with some insane scavengers.
Yeah.
There is one part where she's sneaking by a group of people and gets found out when she passes by like a terminal that has like automated motion sensing on it. So when she walks by, the terminal goes, "Hello and welcome," and she's like, "Oh God," and that's how she gets found out and has to run. And like, I'll admit, I actually thought that was really fun and clever and like original,
Certain things in the station still running, those fucking
and then,
automated like tourist things. I guess, you know what? We should point out that she was really thrown when she saw Axel kill someone right in front of her.
Oh yeah,
right?
She got like extremely, like very upset.
Yeah, that was like the first time she's been like face to face with death, I think. Like, I mean,
yeah, pretty
obviously
much.
she pulled the maintenance jack from a corpse, but Axel just like shot a dude in the head like right in front of her.
Yeah.
Like she was like saving Axel from him. She like hit a guy with a wrench and everything, and then Axel's just like blammo. Yep. And yeah, man. Anyway.
And then after she escapes those people that were by the automated registration kiosk, this is the moment you alluded to earlier where she walks into a room and finds the gun and a recipe to make smoke bombs. And the reason I'm pointing this out is because something narratively relevant actually does happen here. While she's going through the other detritus on the table, she discovers the Nostromo flight recorder and then takes one look at it and goes, "It's fucking empty. Are you seriously fucking real right now?
It's been erased or something."
Yeah, like there's just no data on it. And so again, because I said I was going to be doing this, this kicks in the second flashback that involves Martin Okeke. She's like, I have once again been bamboozled about finding the Nostromo flight recorder, just like when I was 16, ... And then it goes into the flashback.
And then almost when I was 21, ...
Well, that doesn't happen yet, but yes.
Yeah, but we know it does. This is really like the third. She's feeling like this is the third time someone is.
And then after the flashback, she's still back in that room, pissed off that the recorder is empty, and she found that recipe for the smoke bombs, and it explicitly states in the narrative she starts making the smoke bombs, which takes most of an hour to do somehow, and the entire time she hears a rattling in the vents that is implied to be the Xenomorph, and spoiler alert, it is. And even though she's in this room for an hour and the alien is in the vents right above her, it never jumps down and attacks her during that entire hour in the narrative.
Seems like a waste of time in any case, but yeah, man.
And then something else very important happens after this. She has her first encounter with a working Joe.
Those fucking working Joes, dude. Worst, scariest.
Yeah, I was going to say,
the game.
I know you have some opinions about the working Joe, so if you just want to go off on them for a minute, go right ahead.
Well, we should talk a little bit about so the working Joes are like Seegson set out. I guess they decided that actual synthetics looked too human and people didn't like them, so they like made these like shitty plastic looking robots with just like a fucking, like if you just cut the face off of the Michael Myers mask and stuck it on a mannequin, like that's what these fuckers look like. I think maybe the book talks about them having pink skin, but like they definitely have like white beigey skin in the game from what I remember.
And I should say, I just want to interject here real quick. The specific PR stated reason why the working Joes look obviously non-human is because, of like concerns that they'd be able to blend in or whatever. But like, thanks to those between chapter memos, we find out that the real reason they don't look human is because Seegson doesn't have the technology to make them believably
look
human
good.
Looking.
Yes, they just have to look shitty.
They can't. They're not good enough at it to make them look human. So they said, "Oh yeah, that was a purposeful stylistic choice." Wink.
Yeah, and they're controlled by the Apollo AI system, which like runs all of the systems on Sevastopol Station, right?
Yep, correct.
And I just fucking hate them. I fucking hate them. Like, there's something going haywire with the system, like where they are like patrolling out of bounds areas, like protected areas where people are not supposed to be going, with like lethal enforcement, right?
Yeah,
like,
they don't have any weapons, but they will beat and strangle people to death.
You can, and there's like, I don't know, 1,000 of these in the fucking game, and they're
Oh,
everywhere.
there's
And
so
like,
many of them, dude. There's so many of them.
you can't hurt the alien. You can hurt these guys, but that means that these guys fucking, they see you and they just come and they fucking attack you, and you gotta like run from them or like beat them with your wrench, or it's just, they fucking suck, dude. They hate them. When she's at the end of this thing and they're like going like nutso on and just like snapping people's necks, and she's just blowing them away with shotguns. I was like, hell yeah, kill these motherfuckers. I hate them. I hate them so much.
Sure.
Like, you think like regular synthetics are kind of like freaky. These are like, they're like fucking mannequins come to life with like the strength that moms get when their babies are stuck under cars, right? They have like Hulk. They have like Hulk strength. It's not. I don't like it. I don't like it, dude. And they have like just like dead glowing eyes. Like, not even dead. They're just glowing eyes. But like, and they couldn't even like make the voice nice, right? Like they couldn't make them like talk nice. They have to like talk in like garbage robot voice.
Yep. It's all like monotone and like scratchy and like, please, where are you going? Please stop this kind of shit. Yeah.
You are not permitted. And then they like try to fucking kill you. And I hate them. 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 They're the worst part of the game. They're the true villains of the alien universe, man.
But
don't like it.
But yeah, like I was saying, she has her first encounter with a Joe, which, you know, goes fine. It doesn't attack her or anything.
Right.
They had
she's not out of bounds, right?
Yet. Yeah. Not yet. Yeah.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, immediately after that is when she has her first real face-to-face encounter with the Xenomorph, when she's walking down a hallway and she hears a rattling, and then the vent cover drops down from the ceiling and it just drops into the room she's in.
Yeah.
It then goes and wanders off and kills some other scavengers, which, as we talked about earlier, since we're trying to like gloss over those kind of events, there's one reason why I'm bringing this up, and one reason alone. In the description, when it wanders off and goes and kills those other scavengers, the description of when it kills one of them is, I literally wrote it down word for word, and I quote, "It picked him up with one hand and smashed the other hand through his skull."
Hell yeah, it did.
And the reason I like that is because they specifically use the word smashed, which implies the alien punched closed fist through the guy's head to kill him. Like, because that. Like it didn't say slashed, it said smashed, which means he punched this guy in the head so hard he died.
What's funny is in the audiobook version, she says smooshed.
Oh, nice.
No, she doesn't. She doesn't say smooshed.
Okay. Maybe she did. I don't know. It's been a few months. I just, maybe I forgot.
God damn it. Yeah, dude. This alien is a fucking cold-blooded killer.
Oh yeah, man. He's great. He rules. He is. Xenopedia said that assuming that like most of the deaths we see in this game that can be directly attributed to this specific Xenomorph, because as you mentioned, later on we find out there are other ones, but like throughout the game where there's the one chasing you, if we attribute most of those deaths to this one, it is believed that this Xenomorph is the deadliest one that's ever been in the franchise.
Yeah, this thing's body count is like in the triple digits probably.
It's real high.
And it's fucking like, it's unstoppable. Like there are guns in this game and flamethrowers and shit like that. Like you can't kill this thing in the game.
I should say, listeners, sorry, I should say crew, when Neal says that it's unstoppable, he means that literally. In the programming, in the programming of the game, it is literally programmed to be invincible, immortal, and unbeatable.
So this goes back to like what we were saying about Alien 79, the Xenomorph in that just being like murderous and tough versus the like squishy ones we get in later entries, especially like,
for sure,
particularly Aliens is the one with the real squishy guys, and then that then gets translated to the things inspired by Aliens, right? But then stuff like this that's inspired by Alien, the Xenomorph is like hardcore. And I mean, I think even in like Alien versus Predator, the movie, the first movie, the aliens aren't particularly squishy. Like one of them like suffers major damage from like the retracting predator net and still kicks around for the like gets. I think one of them gets its tail cut off and is still kicking around for the rest of the movie. Like they're not squishy and everything. I like it when they're not. It's scarier when they're not squishy.
Agreed.
Yeah.
It's scarier and creepier when they aren't just cannon fodder.
Right. Yeah. And that's, yeah. So that's a thing about aliens that we're going to have to dig into. There must be, like, this is a drone. This one looks like 79 Alien. It doesn't have all the extra detail in its head and stuff, you know?
Yeah. This is like, imagine the one from Alien, but like 2 or 3 feet taller. That is what this thing looks like. Yes.
Right. So this might just be a tougher version than the squishy ones we got in Aliens. I don't really know. I know that people have like pointed out the differences, and I just haven't found that article on the internet yet. Anyway.
Yeah, but anyway, she watches this xenomorph punch through this dude's head to kill him.
Yeah,
and
man.
then, again, she keeps it moving. She comes across a working Joe beating some guy to death, which is fun. And then
no, it's not. It's not fun.
And then she makes it to comms, which is where she was going, because earlier we skipped over it, but like when she passed through like the main like lobby area of the station, she saw the Torrens go by, and that's how she found out that her comms didn't work.
That's
so
exactly.
She's like, now I got. And so she's like, now I got to go to comms to like make them work again.
I will say I do remember, for some reason, that's like at the very beginning of playing the game. I do remember that scene where you're in this and you see the Torrens flying by.
And then when it does, like the window shutters suddenly close and you're like, wait, what? Yeah.
Yeah, man.
It's a good game. That's before the alien shows up. Yeah. But anyway, she makes it to comms and finds out that the reason she hasn't been able to contact the Torrens is because it is on purpose, because Apollo, like the AI controlling the station, has purposely shut off all communications into or out of the station.
Yeah.
However, it didn't cut off all communications. It only cut off like interplanetary. External. That was the word I was looking for. Because while she's in comms, this is, as you mentioned earlier, when she receives the message from Samuels.
Right. Yeah. So he and Nina made it onto the station, but Nina has like suffered a wound, right? Like a pretty bad abdominal
she has
wound.
Some kind of like chest or stomach wound or something. Yeah.
Right.
That like is major enough that she requires some kind of like surgery to close the wound, you know?
Yeah. So is this when Amanda needs to get into like the medical bay and like retrieve first aid kits and stuff?
This is, she gets on a message with them and then decides to go meet them where they are. Then after she gets to them, she realizes, oh, I need a bunch of medical supplies, and that's when she heads over to the medical wing. Yeah.
Right. There's something that annoyed me in this too, when she's like rummaging through for the med kits, where she finds like 2 that have been like scavenged and 1 that is intact, and she takes that one, right?
Yeah.
It's like some video game shit where it's like, well, we need the player to get this, but like, who would go in there, ransack, just take specific, like in an emergency situation, you would just do what Amanda does and go in and grab the fucking first aid kit. You wouldn't open it up and look for specific things and then leave a perfectly good unrummaged through one. Like, oh, I got enough. 4 aspirin, that's enough. I'm not going to take the extra ones from this other kit. Again, it's video game stuff, right?
Yep.
Like that you don't think about when you're playing, but when you're hearing it in a book adaptation, it's a little bit silly.
There are 2 things here that I'd like to mention. One of them is after she gets the message from Samuels, but before she makes it to where they are, she ends up getting cornered in like a small like transit lobby by 2 or 3 Joes, and she beats off. I was gonna say she beats off one of them.
Yeah, maybe that's not the best word.
Let me try that again. She gets cornered in a transit lobby by a couple of Joes, and she beats back. She
maintenance jacks them off,
dude. I know what I'm trying to do here. All right. I keep on deciding not to make the joke, and then you make it for me anyway.
All right. Sorry.
And one of them, she beats it back with her maintenance jack, and this part is the reason why I'm mentioning this scene, because the other one, suddenly there's a gunshot and part of its head blows off and it just falls over and it dies. And then she just runs away, and we never find out where that fucking gunshot came from.
Oh, yeah. I don't think I know that either. No, I remember that part of the book, though.
Yeah, it's just like it literally in my notes. It's like she gets cornered by several more Joes, and then she escapes because one of them just suddenly dies? Question mark. Like
Sure.
she hits the one of them with a maintenance jack, and the other one is coming after her, and then all of a sudden in the narrative, just a hole appears in its head, and it falls over dead. And then that's just never
wild.
followed up on.
Also, those guys go down way easier in this novel than they do in the game.
That is for sure.
But anyway.
But yeah, then she goes and meets with Taylor and Samuels. She finds out that Taylor like needs these like specific medical things. And then she heads to medical and she meets a doctor that is still alive, working in medical, named Coleman. And this is the other part that I wanted to say. This is literally what it says in my notes. She heads to medical. She heads to medical for supplies and meets Coleman, a doctor, who sends her to retrieve a card from an office so they can access the elevator to take it up to the dispensary to get the supplies they're out of. And writing it down, I realized that when I phrase it like that, it really does sound like a video game.
Yeah, there's a few of those things. And doesn't he like have the access card the whole time and he was trying to like...
Well, we eventually find that out, yes, because she goes into one of the other offices to get the key, but then the big man shows up. She manages to avoid him and makes it back to medical. And when she gets there, because like he was in his office and there was like a big like sheet of like plexiglass or whatever separating them. And when she gets back there, she sees him opening up the personal elevator in his office with his own key. And she's like, the fuck, man. And he's like,
gotcha.
And then opens the elevator and then turns to go into the elevator. And there is a xenomorph in it and it rips his head off and he dies.
Yeah. You gotta love moments like that.
And then, as soon as that happens, like while she's like staggering back in surprise from the xenomorph suddenly showing up there and killing Coleman, that's when we have the flashback to when she traveled to Seattle to meet Stefano Vanini.
Gotcha. Okay.
So after that, Coleman got killed. She has the supplies. She actually goes back to the offices to get more supplies. And then she actually discovers Foster's body in an autopsy room.
Right. Yeah, dude.
That doesn't really end up getting like, that doesn't really end up being important at all, but she does like come across the body. Like earlier on, she had heard something about how they had brought on some kind of parasite, and then she finds Foster's body, and just like with the space jockey, its rib cage is like blown open from the inside. And she's like, there must be something else on the ship, because that monster that's been attacking me certainly isn't a fucking parasite.
Right. And she sees also, I always like this detail, the bruising on the face from where the face hugger was like squeezing.
Yep.
That's an important detail.
Also, speaking real quick of faces, there was actually one little detail I meant to mention earlier but forgot to. The beginning of this novel, Amanda is explicitly described as having blonde hair, but in the game, she has brown hair.
In the comics, she has brown hair. She has brown hair. She's a brown
I mean,
hair.
she has brown hair because she's Ellen Ripley too, and Ellen had brown hair.
But could it be like, did she have blonde hair when she was a child, you know? Because like
no, because that detail is mentioned during the present. There's two separate points in this book where she's mentioned as having blonde hair, and they're both in the present sequences, which means in the novel she has brown hair, even though she has blonde hair. I mean, even though in the game she has brown hair.
Maybe she's a bottle blonde, you know?
Maybe. But anyway, she discovers Foster's body, and then on the way back to where Samuels and Taylor are, she walks into this like other terminal lobby, and she notices that the entire room is stacked full of weird yellow barrels. And just as she's about to turn to leave, the xenomorph drops down from the ceiling almost on top of her. And then the entire room gets bathed in floodlights. And then the next thing she knows, she's waking up from a mild concussion after an explosion, and everything is on fire.
Kabang, right? like that Czarface song, Kabang.
Yep. And
Yeah,
let's
dude.
see.
She wakes up and she's like, she's like, I cannot believe the thing didn't kill me. I was donezo, right?
And that's when she pieces together that it must not like fire.
Right. She has no idea how long it's been. She like gets up
Yeah.
and she's like, I better get the fuck out of here before I'm going to burn to death. Is this when she climbs into the vents and she's like so exhausted that she like contemplates just sleeping for a little while? And she's like, I can't do that. If that thing doesn't kill me, the fire's going to burn me alive if I sleep. But it's just like highlighting how worn out she is. I like that detail. There's also these details of her like constantly picking up bottled water and drinking it and getting these, I think, are they called Freeman bars, I think?
She doesn't actually end up being able to eat a Freeman bar until like near the end of the novel, and it only happens the once, but yes, it does happen. So
I like that attention to detail. I don't remember that like needing to drink water being a part of the game, but it might be. You know?
I don't think it is, but
it's cool detail. I like that kind of stuff. There's this so this little sidetrack. There's an old Batman miniseries called Batman Year 100, right? And it's supposed to be set 100 years after. When did Batman debut? 1940.
It was
41.
Well, Detective Comics 27, I believe, was 39, but I believe Batman #1 came out in 1940, I think.
Okay, I think it's the 1939 date. So it's a comic book that takes place 100 years after the first appearance of Batman. It's a Paul Pope book, and you know I love Paul Pope. He did that alternate cover for the Fire and Stone. Anyway, in his Batman design, in that he drew like the concept art is in the back of the trade paperback version. He's got all these like specific pouches, and he's got notated that there's like protein bars and stuff in some of them, and he writes this whole thing how he's like it doesn't even come up in the actual comic book, but he's like, I always get really like, I always think about like Batman's on patrol all night. What is he eating? How is he eating? So I made sure I put pockets on his suit that were designated for protein bars and things like that he would eat while he's out there.
Hey, it makes sense.
I love that. Like I had never really considered that kind of stuff like prior to reading this book. So like whenever this stuff pops up and someone's like really paying attention and like taking time to like show the character hydrating, for instance, I always applaud it. It's one of the things like the Tomb Raider survival trilogy. Like I really, really love that trilogy of games, but Lara doesn't drink water or eat through like the whole fucking thing. Yeah, like
he certainly doesn't.
And this is the one thing those games are missing, in my opinion.
In the first game, there's an early story mission. Yeah, there's an early story mission where you have to kill a deer and eat it.
Yeah,
and
you have to scavenge it.
As far as I can recall, I think that's the only point in the entire trilogy where you're like required to eat or drink anything as part of how the game operates. So
yeah, I could see it slowing the gameplay down, which I understand, but also like I like that stuff, like talking about how dehydrated and hungry Amanda was getting during all of this, like makes it feel real, you know?
Yep.
Anyway, that's all.
But yeah, she's in the vent, she's crawling through, she finds a place to drop down, and then when she does, she finds out that there is one little thing while she's crawling through the vents. She overhears a conversation between other people, where one of them says that the explosion was caused by Marshall Waits. Because that's like a thing he's been doing, is setting up like explosive choke points to try to kill the thing. I guess this is just like a thing he does. And then she drops out of I don't know what to tell you, but she drops out of the vents. And
everyone needs a hobby. I don't know.
Yeah, man. I guess. But when she finally drops out of the vents, turns out she's actually right by where Samuels and Taylor are, which is where she was going anyway. And when she walks in, the two of them are getting yelled at by Waits, and his assistant Ricardo is also there.
Right. And then he's like, your friend Amanda ruined my trap, basically.
Yep.
And Amanda's like, say that to my face, motherfucker.
And he's like, okay. And then turns around and says, you fucking ruined my trap.
I had that thing and I was going to kill it and you fucked it up.
And then right here is where the characters find out what we as readers already knew. The Xenomorph first arrived via the Anisadora docking on the station.
Right. And is this when they reveal that they have the captain in the brig?
Yes, it is the part where we find that out, but it is not yet quite the part where she actually goes to talk to Captain Marlowe.
Right.
She first has to go and get the elevators working again. She has an encounter with a Joe that is locked in a closet. And then after that, then she goes back to the brig and talks to Marlowe about the flight recorder, and Marlowe starts telling her the story that we already knew because we saw it in the prologue.
Right.
And
this is where that gets revealed to you in the game also. Yeah.
That is correct. And while he's telling this story, the narrative does the flashback of when Amanda is watching the videos of the attempted mutiny on the Sotio. Right. That flashback happens during the conversation here.
And also, I guess it should be said that Samuels is administering the first aid for Nina, saving her life.
And also, after this flashback is over, how I mentioned those little memos in between chapters. This memo right here after this chapter is the first one that actually has like narrative relevance.
Right.
And we're 3/4 of the way through the book, and it's the first time it's ever really come up in a meaningful manner. And this specific memo is we find out that all of the other crew members of the Anesidora are dead.
Right.
Other than Marlowe. One of them has a face hugger attached to him.
Yeah.
One of them shot himself when he was about to get attacked by a face hugger.
Yeah. Shot himself in the face.
And the third one got trampled to death during a mass panic when a Xenomorph showed up on the food court of the ship or of the station.
The Galleria.
And so because of that, those 3 are dead. We already know Foster is dead, and we already know there were only 5 crew members. So Marlowe is the only member of the Anesidora that's still even fucking alive by this point.
And he's trying to bargain his way off. Right, because he wants to get out, and Amanda's she won't promise him that he can get on the Torrens because he's like, I can't imagine the captain.
Yeah, and she doesn't have that authority anyway. Right. And it becomes a point of contention because the Anesidora, like the ship itself, still exists and is out in orbit around the station, and it's become a point of contention because Marlowe refuses to give over the codes to automatically bring it in unless he's guaranteed a pathway out, or I don't remember what it is he's asking in return, but he's keeping the ship out there and they need him to bring it in so they can evacuate people, and he fucking refuses to do it.
Yeah, and we know the real reason why. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if we should just talk about him now, or we should. Let's save it. But let's kind of get to it because there's a lot that's going to happen, and it's been an hour and a half.
He shows up again in a major way late in the story. So but Amanda gets pissed when Marlowe doesn't really give her anything, and so she decides to go back to Waits and volunteers to help with his plan to finally kill the Xenomorph. This is also the scene where Amanda finds out that Samuels is a synth. Waits had apparently known the whole time. Samuels is I'd like to help, and then Waits gives him one look and says, "You're a synth, right?" And he goes, "Yep." And Amanda's like, "Oh my god, he's a synth."
Right. But again, he's one of the good ones.
Yep. And that matters.
I'm remembering that correctly, right? He doesn't turn. It's
no, he doesn't. Yeah. He's genuinely one of the good guys in this story. Yes,
he's like a bishop.
Yeah, that is correct. And Waits decides, since you're a synth, you actually can help, and so he sends him down. Waits sends Samuels down to the android processing center so that he can access the core of Apollo
and
try to
get
comms back online and all that.
Right. And this is when Apollo pushes back, right? He gets into
We don't see it happen on screen until after the fact, but when Samuels goes there, that's when everything really starts to go to shit. Yeah.
Right.
Waits sends Samuel over to android processing, and then the three of them, that would be Ricardo, Waits, and Amanda, decide that what they're going to do is basically trap the big man on this specific section of one of the spires that's called Gemini Lab. And what they're going to do is basically the same. They're going to try to do the same thing that the crew from the Alien original screenplay comic did. They're going to trap the xenomorph inside that lab and then launch it off of the station, because that entire lab can be removed from the station. So they're going to trap the xenomorph in it and then just blast it off into space. And she basically functions as bait by going up to Gemini Lab herself. And
nobody else in this fucking book is worth a damn.
Yeah, is allowed to do anything,
except for Samuels, I guess.
And so she goes up there, and then to basically power it up, which will attract the xenomorph. It shows up on Gemini Lab. Then while both of them are on there, Waits is like, fuck it, and hits the button to blast it off into space, while Amanda is still on it.
Sure. And then she's like tumbling around in zero gravity. She's like glad that the artificial gravity didn't kick in, because otherwise she would have been like slammed against the hole. But then the gravity kicks in and she like falls and like whacks herself on the floor or something.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And the big guy starts coming after her, but luckily she has a flamethrower. She fights it off, and then she pushes herself out of an open airlock
she does.
Drifts through space back to the ship. This is the second of, I believe, either 3 or 4 times she shoves herself out of an airlock and drifts through space to get to where she's going.
Yeah, it's just another fucking Tuesday for her, though.
And then she makes it in through an open airlock, gets back onto the ship, or gets back onto the station, and then when she does, there is an announcement that says that Apollo has raised the hazard containment alert to level Omega, whatever that means.
Jesus Christ. This is when the working Joes start going on like the rampage.
Turns out like there's other stuff that level Omega means, but practically speaking, for the people on the ground, what level Omega is the working Joes just start beating to death any person they see anywhere in the station.
Like non-restricted areas, like public areas, like I think the food court.
Like literally every single human they come across, like literally any human, the working Joes just murder them.
People are begging for their lives. The working Joes are just like snapping their necks and shit. Like it's a worker revolution is what it is, honestly.
It is literally what it is. And this is relevant because she gets back to the marshal's office and everyone is gone and Waits' crumpled up corpse is lying there.
Waits is dead. The other guy's dead too.
Ricardo. And Ricardo is not dead. He is the only person there that's still alive.
Okay.
And
just kidding.
And now she needs to figure out where Samuels and Apollo is, and so she basically traces Samuels' steps to android processing, who is about to use the reformatting chamber to interface with Apollo to lift the lockdown.
Right.
And he tries it because he's like about to do it when she arrives, and he tries it and fails to do it. It does not work.
It just fucking goes wrong.
Unfortunately, it just doesn't work for like seemingly no reason. I guess he's just not formatted correctly to interface with it. Unfortunately, though, because due to the way, like, the safeguards and like the like Apollo itself, the interface works. It rejecting him and it not working kills him.
Yeah.
So Samuels dies.
Good boy android dies.
Luckily, he was able to give her login access to the reactor core. He was able to like sign her up and like give her credentials before he dies.
Yeah.
And
she downloads those to her hacking tool, probably because it's a video game.
Yep. And then there's a brief interlude where Ricardo says he found a recording of Taylor attempting to negotiate with Marlowe in the brig.
This is
then
huge.
That's when the Joes bust in.
Right. So, but Taylor's trying to negotiate with Marlowe, and she's literally saying, like, I'm authorized to negotiate with you for any information you have on the Nostromo or the creature. So
indicating that they knew there were xenomorphs here.
Weyland-Yutani knew that there were xenomorphs here. They knew there were creatures. I'm sure they know what's on LV-426 at this point, right? They'd probably been there themselves. I don't know if they had been there themselves in the intervening time, but it makes sense that they would have gone. But I guess they're trying to keep the shit under wraps also, so not being too public about it. But this means that Nina Taylor, legal representative for WY, pardon me, Weyland-Yutani, who Amanda Ripley just helped save the life of by getting her medical supplies, is now has known about the creature and basically the fate of the Nostromo the entire time.
Yeah. This entire time. That is correct.
Like, we know that. Amanda doesn't make the connection between what happened on the ship, on the Nostromo, and the creature. She still thinks it could be two separate incidents.
Yeah.
But we know it's not. So, fuck you, Nina. But yeah, as this is happening, the Joes like start pouring in, and like the transmission just cuts off with Nina and Marlowe, and Marlowe's like, "Get me out of here!" Right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's just a recording though that Ricardo found, and that gets played to her while she is on the shuttle on the way to Android, or not to Android processing, to the core of Apollo. And she goes in to try to interface with Apollo in this like Cerebro looking room. Well, how should I phrase this?
Cerebro room.
Well, I called it a Cerebro room as a joking callback to when I called the Mother Room from Alien 1 a Cerebro room. And while I was saying that joke out loud, I went, oh, that's why it looks like that. It's another reference to the first movie. Duh.
It's a mother room. Yeah.
It's a mother room. Yeah. And she's talking to Apollo on it, and she tries to shut down the Joes, and she can't, for a extremely interesting reason. Weyland-Yutani Special Order 939 is in progress, and so therefore she cannot shut down the working Joes.
Yeah, Special Order 939.
Which is significant because, again, it is a Weyland-Yutani order. Why does that matter? This is a Seegson station. Who gives a shit? Well, looking through the records, she finds out that after she got signed on to this project, while they were in transit towards the station, during that few days they were like during that little while they were in hypersleep or whatever, after they had already left Luna, Weyland-Yutani bought this station.
Yeah, and implemented Special Order 939.
And presumably they bought it specifically to initiate Special Order 939.
Priority 1, protect specimen, maintain station quarantine, disallow communications, all other considerations secondary. Very similar to Order 937. I got a little bit of trivia here. There's a I think this was in the comic book prequel to Isolation.
All right.
There's a working Joe in that designated Chuck, and its number, it is Seegson Working Joe 937. Just a nice little reference.
That's fun.
That's all. Just
But like I said, turns out Weyland-Yutani bought the station while they were on the way here, presumably because they knew the Xenomorphs were here. And 939 turns out it's another crew expendable situation.
Heyo.
And after seeing that, she pieces together that Weyland-Yutani must have already known the creature was here before they had even arrived. And unfortunately, the reason why, like the specific like programming reason why she can't shut down the Joes due to 939 being active is because 939 as like a programming limitation can't be lifted until the core reactor core is scanned, and
Sure.
unfortunately the core scanners that you can use and activate remotely are, wouldn't you know it, fucking broken. So
Of course
once
they are.
again, Amanda herself has to go do the menial engineering job.
Because again, it's a video game. So
And
they
that's
got to
right.
send you down to the engineering deck.
And so on her way to the core, she fights through a whole bunch of Joes, and then she gets to the reactor, and haha, whoops. Turns out there is a Xenomorph nest built inside of the reactor core.
A whole fucking nest. We talked about this a little bit earlier, and is this how did the nest develop? And the creators of the game intentionally leaving that vague, and I will say it bugs me a little bit to not have a definite answer on that. I would love it if they embraced the egg morphing thing for this, though.
Yeah.
Just made that canon, that can happen in an isolated environment, hey, alien isolation.
Yeah, I personally will. There is something that I would like to call back to a previous episode. It might have been the original screenplay comic episode. I think you said it in, because we were discussing about how at the end of that comic, the egg morphing thing was made canon for that story. And then since that was part of a deleted scene of the movie, they came up with the alternate hatching explanation of a queen for 2.
Right.
And you went on record that you like the queen explanation more than the egg morphing explanation.
I do. I do.
Well, the reason I'm bringing it up is because I like the egg morphing explanation better.
Okay.
Because, for one primary reason, because having a queen, having that role in Xenomorph quote unquote society, literally just turns them into they're bugs but big.
Right, that's fair.
Whereas their breeding ritual being egg morphing instead, that's a weird, no pun intended, alien, to our eyes, unnatural way to breed and impregnate and stuff. And so I think ultimately I like the egg morphing explanation better, just because it's more weird and bizarre than just having a queen is,
Yeah, that's fair. I think I said that it was an interesting idea. The egg morphing thing makes them a virus, right?
That might have actually been what you said. Yeah. It's the difference between them being insects and them being a plague,
But what this is making me think of is it doesn't have to be an either or. It can be a both, right?
Yeah, because that's the thing. It's like you said, they have the roar in there at one point indicating that there's a queen.
Sure.
But while she's making her way through the nest in the reactor core, she comes across people that have been partially egg morphed,
Right.
So the game and by extension the novel kind of tries to give it to you both ways.
It does make sense that if you had an isolated drone like you did in Alien 79 and like you did at the beginning of this, that they would, with enough source material, I suppose, develop a way to start a nest on their own. It shouldn't have to be dependent on a queen. If they have the ability to lay one ovomorph, or they have the ability to egg morph captive people into ovomorphs to start the spread. It makes sense that would be a part of their life cycle. It's just not something we see, but I feel like we've probably seen enough instances of isolated nests in video games or in comic book stories or novels where they had to have come from somewhere. They're too far away from a queen. Yeah. Do we really believe that all of these eggs that are inside this one building in Alien versus Predator 2 were carried there by drones and left there, or a queen walked in and laid these and then went back to the hive?
And then left. Yeah. There is, I don't know what story it is. It might not even necessarily be a story. It might be for instance, something along the lines of say, the fucking Colonial Marine Technical Manual, or it might be one of those types of books rather than in a fiction prose story. But I remember coming across something one time where they kind of tried to thread that needle and come up with an explanation to where both of them can still be canon and work together. And the explanation that they came up with is basically that, the queen creates the hive, but like you said, if there's one individual drone out somewhere where there isn't a queen nearby, it has the ability to egg morph, but it can only do it if there isn't a queen nearby. It gains the ability to egg morph to basically be able to start a hive so that a queen can come in and run it and all that.
Yeah.
They kind of tried to thread that needle, and I was like, sure, man, why not? That's cool. That works just as well as anything else, you know?
I think that was in Alien, the role-playing game, in the supplemental, because it says the process of egg morphing was later officially explained in universe following the release of Alien, the role-playing game.
All right.
It has been suggested that egg morphing is the means by which xenomorphs create a queen. Yeah, man. I think that's where you got that from.
Yeah, like they gain the ability to do egg morphing so that they can create a queen. And once the queen is created, they just can't do it anymore.
So I think Drone you're seeing throughout the game is OG Drone. I think he took a little bit of time and he egg morphed himself a queen and he started the hive with that queen in the engineering decks. I'm totally down with that as an explanation.
Works for me.
That's canon. As far as like that seems to have been canonized in the role-playing game. That seems to be a Bible that a lot of fans are referencing because Free League just like did their research, you know?
Yeah, they hired a guy who literally came in and like he's like a science fiction writer and stuff. He's like a professional sci-fi writer, and they hired him to come in and basically clean up their canon and be like, give me a single unified alien canon. And that's what he did. And part of that is like for instance, in the William Gibson version of Alien 3, the Union of Progressive Peoples or whatever it's called, that is now canon because it appears in the RPG.
Yeah,
like
they also
the existence of the UPP is canon now because it's in the RPG.
And I believe the UPP has a role in Inferno's Fall also. Like I feel like Inferno's Fall, the newest novel, has taken a bunch of those things. Like I was listening to a little bit of it.
Ties a lot of stuff together.
I was listening to an interview with the authors. I can't pull their names right now, and I apologize. It was on the Perfect Organism podcast. And they were talking about like pulling things in from Alien's Dead Orbit and obviously engineer stuff from Covenant and then the UPP and then the Juto Combine from the real heart of the series, Alien Covenant Origins.
That's right.
Like, yeah, just tying all this shit together and like, it's cool. It's admirable. I applaud the efforts. I don't personally need all of that stuff stitched together, but like good for them for finding a unified alien universe. And
yeah, like it's that's not really something where I was clamoring to see all of these little sidebar references pulled together, but the fact that they were able to get like a reasonable cohesive story out of all those little side bits is very intriguing.
It is. Yeah. Again, I applaud the effort. Let's get through this guy, man. We're
getting pretty close. She's in the reactor. She decides she's going to reset the reactor, which will purge it and burn everything in it and kill all these fuckers away.
Yeah.
And she manages to vent the reactor. It goes almost perfectly swimmingly. The nest does get destroyed. The one problem is that from her vantage point, she sees like five xenomorphs escape.
She was a little bit like, I can't tell if they're xenomorphs or if they're working Joes, because that's the other thing. Like this was wasn't this near the working Joe like manufacturing level also?
Yeah, it was. She had to pass through the abandoned Joe factory to get to the core. Yeah.
Sure. And, this was a abandoned working Joe factory, not abandoned like Hasbro G.I. Joe factory.
Correct.
Unfortunately.
And while this happens, this is when the final flashback with like Brodsky and Dimitri, where like Zula gives the testimony and all that stuff. This is when that final flashback, which is the last flashback in the book, this is when it gets dropped into the narrative.
This is we are pretty darn close to the end, aren't we?
Yep. And then right after that, there's another plot relevant memo in between the two chapters. This one is addressed to Taylor that makes it explicit that yes, WY knew the xenomorphs were there. It specifically says that is why she's getting sent there, and they literally have the line, the reason you're going there is to initiate Order 937, is what they say.
Fuck. Yeah. Retrieve organism for analysis.
Yeah.
Crewexpendable.net.
Luckily, that's right, crewexpendable.net. Everyone go there right now. Luckily, though, turns out that resetting the reactor also reset pretty much the entire station. And so all of the systems are coming on. And luckily, especially for you, Neal, it also permanently powers down all of the Joes on the station.
Thank fucking Jesus. Can't wait to get to that part of the game.
And then let's see.
I cannot stress how much I hate them. I hate them so much.
Let's see. The scans pick up an approaching ship. They're pretty sure it's the Anesidora. And so that's why that's why Amanda has one final thing she has to do. She has to go down to medical and drive one of the emergency ambulance shuttles out to the Anesidora, because now that it's been brought in, it's close enough to fly one of the shuttles out, and they don't have any other shuttles she can take to get there.
Yeah, man.
She gets to the Anesidora, it's powered down, and then she turns it on, and then after turning it on, she finds out why it was powered down in the first place. Marlowe is on the ship and has Taylor hostage.
Yeah, dude. He's out of his fucking mind, right? Now, here's the part I touched on earlier. Like, obviously, we were talking about Ellen Ripley earlier and how she's like pragmatic in a way that other people aren't. And, you know, she has a way of being able to sway people to her side, like she does with Hicks and aliens and all that kind of stuff, with the idea of let's take off and nuke the entire site from orbit. The joke that my D&D group does not think is funny.
Yeah.
Marlowe is like, he's there, like he's almost there where Ripley is, where Ripley absolutely wants to wipe this species off the fucking planet. She doesn't want anybody to know about them. She doesn't want anybody to find them. She wants to destroy all traces of them. Marlowe's got that same thing in his brain, right? But he's racked with this guilt of taking his wife into that derelict ship and exposing her to the facehugger and losing her. Like, he threw quarantine rules out, all of this kind of stuff just to save her life, and then he couldn't, and then he unleashed this horrible monster, and he's being destroyed from the guilt of what he did, which is, I think, the difference between him and Ripley, because Ripley didn't break quarantine rules, right? She was level-headed. She was, again, pragmatic. He did. So all the stuff he's saying to Amanda over the comms in this conversation of like, I'm gonna crash my ship, my reactor's gonna blow, I'm gonna crash the ship into the Sevastopol Station, blow the whole thing apart, turn my ship into a nuke, all of that kind of stuff. We have to destroy all traces of this thing and all people who were exposed to it. Your mother would have been on my side, right?
Yeah.
Like, all of that stuff is true to a point, but he's just been driven mad with guilt. You can't argue with him a little bit, right? Like, if there was no other way, like, you would do that, right?
Yeah. And like, here's the thing, like you said, his plan is he's going to overload the ship's reactors, turning it into a nuclear reactor, and then crash it into Sevastopol, which will blow both of them up and also sink it into the planet, which is significant because part of the reason why Marlowe wants to do it this specific way is because he's purposely trying to destroy all of the evidence that was here so that when Weyland-Yutani comes by, there's nothing there to find.
Nothing there to find. And the distress beacon's been turned off on LV-426, right?
Yep.
It's going to make it hard to find that as well.
Yeah, he's trying to wipe out any evidence of what happened here so that there's nothing Weyland-Yutani can use to, like, advance their own interests. Basically.
You can't blame him for that. You can't, like, you know, the method is maybe not the best, right? But what else does he reveal? So Amanda's on the ship and she's like trying to hack through gates and stuff to like get to the reactor to stop this from happening.
Basically,
still sort of save Nina Taylor, you know?
like when she confronted Coleman, the doctor in medical earlier, like, you know, he was in his office and there was that clear like window that they could talk to each other through.
Right.
There's a similar situation here. He's in the engine room. He has Taylor hostage and they're like blocked off by some kind of like, wall or window or something like that, but they can see each other. And Marlowe is basically like, you want some fucking evidence here? I'll give it to you. Turn around. And then she turns and looks at the terminal behind her and how she found the flight recorder earlier and there was no data on it.
Here's all the data.
Turns out the reason there was no data is because they did manage to encrypt and hack the flight recorder, and they downloaded all of the information onto their ship's computer. So she finally, after all this time, has access to the Nostromo's flight recorder.
So she learns that her mom encountered this alien,
one of these
as well. Yeah.
And that she survived is the important part.
And she learns that her mom survived. Her mom is at least survived that encounter and is out there somewhere on a lifeboat, hopefully still around, right? Like,
correct.
I mean, she understands that space is big and lifeboats are small, but like she has a chance, right, of finding her mom.
That's right. And so, like, you know, she suddenly emotionally experiences a full 180 and goes from, I'm so pissed off at my mom for not being back on my 11th birthday, to, oh my God, I am a endless wellspring of hope. I'm not going to stop looking for her for the rest of my fucking life, you know?
Sure. And sadly, like, it's kind of a bummer for us because we know it's not going to
know that's not going to happen.
Unless you count the scene from the Aliens special edition, which just does not track with the rest of this.
Yeah.
You know, it just doesn't. Like this game makes that scene not able to happen because that Amanda knows all about the alien, right? Like
which is wild considering that Amanda would not be the main character of this game if it weren't for that scene that established she existed in the first place.
Yeah, it's weird.
But anyway, I should mention real quick that just for all you completionists out there and all you people that like care about how the continuity operates, they actually introduce a minor retcon to the original movie in this scene because the information that that Amanda plays on the terminal is not the message we see Ripley record onto the flight recorder at the end of the movie.
Right.
It is apparently after she did that, like, you know, she in the movie we see her, you know, record the stuff onto the recorder, and then she grabs Jones and goes into like a pod, and like we see her with her eyes closed and she's just like lying there. But apparently, according to this, immediately after it cuts away, she opens her eyes and says, I need to make another recording, and jumps out of the cryopod and goes over, because what the message we actually get is an additional report appended on after the fact that is a personal message to her daughter, Amanda.
Sure. Do you think it's possible in the context of the movie that she might have recorded that first and then recorded the final log for the Nostromo?
I mean, is it possible? Yes.
I like the idea that she gets in the pod. She's like, eyes are closed. Right before this hypersleep, she goes, "Oh fuck!" and just jumps out of bed and like, "I have my daughter."
Well, like honestly, I kind of suspect that is what they're implying happened, because the beginning of the message that Amanda listens to literally says like appended report dash personal message or whatever, implying it was recorded after the fact. But anyway, for all you completionists out there, if you're wondering what the actual contents of the recording is, she basically the contents doesn't tell you anything new. What it is it restates what happened during the events of the movie, but phrased in such a way where an 11-year-old would be able to understand it. Like, you know, we were on a mission, a big scary monster showed up, I was the only one that survived, and so I'm recording this before I go sleepy buys, you know?
I'm alive. Yeah, I am alive.
And let's see, this is when we find out that Marlowe's plan is that he's going to overload the ship and then ram the station. Then, surprisingly, Taylor beats Marlowe to death with a wrench.
Yeah, she does.
Unfortunately, even though they managed to stop the engine from overheating, there's some kind of like power overflow stack issue or whatever, and the engine explodes anyway, which kills Taylor as well.
Yeah, but like she kind of had it coming, right? Like
she certainly did.
She was a company shill. I don't know.
Let's see. She gets back to the shuttle. The shuttle gets back to the station. She hears a message from the Taurans, which implies that they're still kicking around.
Right.
She finds out that the explosion has caused a problem with the station that makes it go into a decaying orbit. And so it is only a matter of time until it collapses on itself and falls into the atmosphere of the planet.
Yeah, it's breaking apart, circling this gas giant.
So
the xenomorphs are still bumming around. Doesn't she see them like running around on some cables and stuff outside the ship? She's
not
shocked.
Quite yet. Not quite.
Okay.
That does happen very, very soon, but there is one thing before that that is irrelevant. She goes back to the marshal's office to get Ricardo and then finds out that he has a face hugger on him.
This is when, okay. All right. There was a scene in the game, I think at this point, originally a planned part where she was going to have to go back into the colony, and the colony was just going to have been much larger at this point than previously. So like I like the idea that it's spreading.
But turns out Ricardo has a face hugger on him, so she leaves him behind. She has to go down to this lower platform and crawl across a towing clamp to get to the Taurans, and when she gets to the Taurans, she looks back and like the two clamps that were attached to, that the ship were attached to, that she used to crawl over, that's when she sees the two xenomorphs crawling down the cable after them, or after her, I should say.
Like, I can't believe they can survive in a vacuum.
Yeah, and this is when, she finds out that they can survive in a vacuum. And let's see, she uses some explosives to blow the clamp hookups off. And then she manages to get inside the ship, and when she does, she discovers that everyone on the Taurans is dead, and there is a xenomorph on the ship with her.
Jesus Christ. Yeah, man. Bad fucking luck.
So let's see, it jumps at her, and she's still standing in the airlock when this happens. And since she still has her EVA suit on, she just hits the airlock door open, or button door, and both of them just get blown out into space.
It's interesting because it could have been a moment, because it's the same ship model, right, as the Nostromo. Same event. Like they could have done a bookended repeat of Alien with the shuttle and everything.
Yeah.
At that point.
And they almost do it, but then they decide to do something else instead.
Sure. Subvert our expectations.
Let's see. She blows both of them out the airlock, and it presumably drifts off forever into space. And she's, of course, in danger of doing the same. And at this point in the narrative, I got a brief little pop quiz for you. At this moment in the narrative, in her internal monologue, she congratulates herself, because she thinks she's about to die. She's like, well, I'm about to die, but at least I managed to kill 5 of those fucking things before I died. So I wanted to ask you, what were the 5 xenomorphs that she killed? Can you name the situations in which it happened?
No.
All right.
I can't. There's the one in the medical pod, or not the medical pod, right? Well,
I'll start in order. It was the big man.
Or she talked about 5 working Joes she killed. Yeah.
Now she was talking about xenomorphs. Okay. There was the first one was the big man.
Sure.
That
big guy.
She launched out from Gemini Lab.
That's what I was thinking. Not the medical pod, Gemini Lab.
And then there were the 2 of them crawling on the cables towards her just now. They got knocked onto space when she blew them away. Then there was the 4th one. Then there was the 4th one that she blew out the airlock with herself.
Just now.
But just now. But there was a 5th one that I accidentally skipped over in my narrative.
I have no idea. Was this in? It was on the Anisadora.
No, I accidentally skipped it over, but it was after she gets back to the marshal's office and finds Ricardo face hugged.
Right.
She has to head over to the platform that the towing clamps are on. And when she gets there, she finds out she needs an EVA suit. So she has to do a little bit of backtracking to the nearest EVA locker. And when she does, she gets ambushed by a xenomorph. And then she goes, oh shit, and pulls out a flamethrower and burns it to death.
That's right. Okay. I can remember that.
Yeah. And the reason that is significant is because she burns it to death. And then immediately after that, she's running back with the suit, and she doesn't have the flamethrower anymore, and she has her shotgun instead, and she gets ambushed by 2 xenomorphs, and she puts 2 rounds from the shotgun into the shoulder of one of them.
Yeah, and she learns about the acid blood.
Yeah, and 96% of the way through the book, she finds out it has acidic blood.
She was like, holy shit, these things have acid blood. That's right, because then she's on a clock to get clear before it eats through everything. Right, I remember that.
But yeah, smash cut to back where we were. She blows herself out of the airlock, and she's drifting.
Right. And this part is apparently an epilogue that was part of the web series. This wasn't actually in the game, this part where she's drifting.
Well,
worth talking about anyway.
Yeah, for sure. Because what actually happens is that she's drifting around, and while she does, she notices a flashing light in the debris and realizes it's like a big, like, buoy-size comms beacon.
Sure.
And she's like, I gotta get over there. And so she uses her little EVA thrusters to get over there. And then there's this really weird moment where they have this, like, sudden jump scare where, like, while she's approaching towards it, she like sees a xenomorph like clutching onto some debris nearby.
Yeah, dude.
And she like gets scared, and then like when she realizes it's not like coming after her or moving, and she's like, I don't know, is like asleep or dead or whatever. Whatever, I don't care. And then she's like, maybe it's not even a xenomorph, who knows, maybe I'm just seeing things.
Right.
And then we never even get a definitive answer as to whether it was a xenomorph or not.
I remember her like, because she's essentially orbiting this planet, and like
she's like adrift in orbit around it. Yeah.
So she has to like really time her thrusters so that she can attach to the communications beacon. And she's thinking like this alien got blasted out the airlock, the other ones got blasted away. Like xenomorphs could be in orbit with me, right?
Yeah.
Like I have to keep my eye out for it. Like, but also we know that there's a sequel to this called Alien Blackout on mobile, and there is a xenomorph running around. I don't know where she's on in that, if she's back on the Torrens or something like that.
Yeah, actually, I'm not actually sure.
We should find out. I'm going to try to find out right now.
All right, well, while you're doing that, there's like 2 sentences of narrative left.
What I'm wondering is if that xenomorph is the one from Alien Blackout. You know what I mean? Like that was a setup for that. Okay, it is a different ship in that. So
it is okay, gotcha. So yeah, like I said, there's that brief jump scare where we don't even find out if it actually was a xenomorph or not. And then just like the other 3 times she jumps out of an airlock and drifts through space, her plan works, and she manages to get onto the comms buoy and then use its increased power and range to like blast out an emergency mayday signal to just whoever's listening. And then she just posts up to wait for someone to show up.
Yeah, and man.
That's how the book ends. There is apparently, I think maybe, I don't remember if it was like in the show or what it was, but I do know that there is one moment that isn't depicted in this novel where she's like lying there like adrift or unconscious or whatever, and she's just like out in the debris. And then a ship comes in and has like spotlights, and it's shining around on everywhere, and like the final shot is like the spotlight landing on her while she's drifting through space.
Right.
But I don't know like what version of isolation that scene is in, but I know it exists somewhere or another. It's just not depicted in the novel, you know?
I think it's the web. I think it's probably in the web series,
All right, gotcha.
unless it's the intro to Alien Blackout. It's a good chance that that ship is the USCSS Halden. Well, maybe not. I'm going to take that back. I don't know the story of Blackout. There's a whole other station, the Mendel Station, and the
Yeah.
USCSS Halden. So
There
never
sure
mind.
is. And like I said, that's the end of the story. And I'll admit there is other stuff in my notes, but I think this episode's probably gone on long enough.
I mean, we're going to touch on Alien Isolation stuff in the future as well.
Yeah, for sure.
But that's kind of it, though. That is the story of Amanda Ripley on Sevastopol Station. Minor gripes aside about the video gamey stuff, right?
Yeah.
I think this is very successful as a novel, and I think this is a very, very good alien story. And I think the novel really highlights how good the alien story is in the game also. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
this is strong alien content, in my opinion. I'm a big fan of the game. I'm glad we read this book. This is one that I can see myself going back to, even though I know the story now and I can play the story. I could see myself listening to this again. There's a couple of them that I've listened to more than once. This is probably going to become one of them.
I will admit, now that I do have the full story, like, you know, have the Sevastopol stuff, have like the flashback stuff to when she was younger. Now that I did get all of that, I wish that the novel just had the Sevastopol stuff, because now that I know her backstory, I don't need to hear about it every time, you know?
Sure, that's fair. I don't mind personally.
Well, see, and that's the thing. I don't mind it either, but like my issue is as you like my one, I don't want to even say issue, gripe, I guess. My one problem with it is, like you mentioned earlier, it's kind of stock. It's kind of stereotypical.
Sure.
Like her backstory ultimately isn't really anything like super original. And so it's just like it adds stuff as far as characterization for Amanda, but now that I already know it, I don't really
you don't need to learn it again.
Hear it again. You know, that's kind of my thing. Because like you said, it's not bad. And Keith DeCandido, like, he wrote it well, and it's like a well-written backstory.
Right.
It's just, it's not anything I haven't ever heard before.
I do like how sometimes the flashbacks tie into the present day things, like when she finds the empty flight recorder and she thinks like, oh fuck, I've been tricked again. And like when, you know, she has the flashback with, I'm going to call him Blasco again. I know that's not his name. Brodsky, where she had to crawl through the vents and stuff. And then obviously a lot of allusions to that in this. Like, I like the way they tie those things into this. And then obviously this, you know, the story, even like the story of the Anisadora and how that mirrors the story of the Nostromo. And then Amanda learning the story of the Nostromo and how that's mirroring the events that she's going in. Like, even like those are technically flashbacks too. Like, I think the story works well. I think that having those flashbacks in the story adds to the book, like the narrative overall. So I don't mind experiencing them again, but I totally understand where you're coming from. Like, for you, maybe playing the game is the way to go. Maybe watching the web series is the way to go. For me, I will probably listen to this again. Probably not near future. We got enough other stuff to talk about.
Well, here's the thing. I can't disagree with you that I would read it again, because as I said in the previous episode, I have read this twice already.
You've read it twice. Yeah, you've already been through it.
So, I mean, I can't say I wouldn't read it again because I already have, you know?
Right. But again, you know? Like,
again.
I get it. Yeah, man. Anything else you want to say about this before we sign off?
Yeah, like I was actually mentioning to you off air, but I guess I'll tell this story again for the listeners so they can get a laugh out of it. I use, to take my notes for our episodes, I use an app called Keep Notes.
Sure.
And I found out the hard way that one individual note on Keep Notes, they've apparently put a character limit on it, because I was like 85 or 90% of the way through the book. Like, actually, I can tell you, I got it was during the part like where on the Anisadora where Marlowe had Taylor hostage. At some point during that scene, I hit the character limit and I was like,
damn.
The hell? And so I took that chunk of the story because that happens immediately after the final flashback. I took that chunk of the story and had to start a second page of notes in my app. So
Holy
if I'm
moly.
going through looking to see if there's anything else I want to say, I now have 2 different pages I have to scroll through. So
Jesus. A lot of notes, man.
A lot of notes. I was surprised too because like it was I believe I even mentioned in the previous episode, I was kind of trying to, in my notes, gloss over the events of the game because I knew we were also going to do an episode on the game.
Right.
And I think the second half of this episode ended up being longer than the first one. I thought it was going to take like an hour, and I think we've been recording for like over 2 hours now.
Yeah, we have.
Yeah,
lot to say on this. I think it speaks to the strength of this, and like more happens in the story of this game than happened in Alien. There are more events to cover. There is
it is a lot longer, that's for sure.
Right. And I think that is, again, by nature of it being based on a video game where they want you to feel like you're getting. I think I read that like if you rush through Alien Isolation, you can finish it in 18 and a half hours ballpark, average completion time.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that too, because sorry, go ahead.
The audiobook was 8 hours long, right?
Yeah.
So like 8.5 or something like that. So like there's just a lot of stuff happening. That's kind of it.
And that's actually something where I remember a big gripe about this game when it came out is a lot of people were like, this game is way too long. I saw a lot of people that are like, this game should have been like literally half the length.
I don't know, man. Well, yeah, I guess a 9-hour game that would be all right.
But anyway, going back to for the continuity nerds, this game takes place in December of 2137. I don't know if we ever stated that at any point or not. We may have, but
I'm not sure. What year does Alien take place?
I believe it's 2122, I think.
Yeah, that sounds right.
I think it's 2122. And then, because 2 takes place in 2179, and it's explicitly 57 years after. So, 1 takes place in 2122. Isolation takes place in 2139. And then 2 takes place in 2179.
Okay, there we go.
Or sorry, no, I said 2129. This game takes place in 2137. Sorry, I got the dates wrong. Yeah, no 37.
Worries. The commercial space tug Nostromo. I love that. A space tug. That's a fun
space tug.
Space tug.
I honestly, though, like I said, this entire time I've kind of been vamping to go through my notes a little to see if there's anything else I wanted to say. I already mentioned the stuff about how they retroactively added Zula to this story, even though she literally didn't exist when it was actually made.
Right. But I like, I like that they made it helps tie Isolation into the larger universe. I think that was a nice touch.
Which is also helpful because thinking about it now, I'm not going on record and saying this definitively for sure. I am positive, but like, I'm not sure that the events of Alien Isolation are really referenced in any material that isn't part of the Isolation sub-series. You know what I mean?
I think so. I mean, Amanda Ripley shows up in
It's
comics.
mentioned in the RPG, I suppose.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Ripley does show up in some comics, too. That's right.
And I know
about that.
And I know what we're going to talk about next episode, Out of the Shadows. They talk about Worker Joes in that. I think the events are considered canon in the Dark Horse universe and in the novels, like the series of novels as well. Anything with Zula Hendricks in it, especially, I think Isolation is canon. The question is, I don't know if it's canon in the Marvel universe. Because like we talked about that last week when we were going over the timeline of that. They're referencing very specifically Alien and Aliens and then the Marvel story arcs and nothing prior to that. So whether that's, again, just continuity stuff they haven't sorted out on their own, or because I know that these are going to get reprinted in the original year's omnibus.
Yeah.
Number 3, the Isolation comics are going to be in that, or comic. I think there's just a one shot. I'm not sure, but
there's a prequel comic. Because they didn't make a comic book adaptation of the game. They made a novel and a web series.
Right.
So I think the prequel comic is the only Isolation comic there is, I think.
But Amanda Ripley does show up in other stories. Yeah. I guess it's, jury's out, I think, on if it's part of the Marvel series or not. I hope that it is, but it does seem like the novels are intent on carrying on the legacy of this
for sure.
section of Alien, like expanded universe stuff. Novels and comics intertwined with each other. So, but we'll see about the Marvel series as a whole. Anyway,
we'll get there eventually. And, like you already mentioned, crew listeners out there, our next episode is, I can't imagine why it's not going to be an episode on the novel Out of the Shadows from 2014.
That's right. I specifically will be listening to the Dirk Maggs produced audio drama.
I don't remember. I mean, I have an audio recording of the book, but I don't remember whether it's the audio drama or the audio book. I'm not sure off the top of my head which one it is.
Well, we'll see how that recording goes. If we read two different versions or listen to two different versions of the thing, but
that'll be fun.
Yeah, but I remember, like, there's some funny canon stuff that they do in this book that, like, it stretches my my disbelief. Like,
there's one at the end involving Ellen Ripley that specifically makes me go, what?
Yeah, but you will see me make the case for that when we get to that in the episode. But again, it's the stretchiest of stretches.
I'm not saying you can't make it work. What I'm saying is I think it's extremely stupid and they shouldn't have made it work.
It asks a lot of the reader.
But we'll talk about that in the next episode. So this one's already running long enough as it is. We don't need to be talking about our next episode already.
Alien Out of the Shadows up next. Until then, stay frosty.